What's up, YouTube family? I am so happy to be checking in with you guys for another Wednesday video. There's so much going on in the world these days, and you know, one of the things the Unfrumpy Mommy and I have always tried to do on this channel is occasionally, you know, come on here and talk to you guys about current trending topics. So first and foremost, I want to say I appreciate all of you that commented on my previous video. It was all about the hustle mentality and more or less what, you know, this idea of should you go to college, should you not go to college. To me, that's all a bigger part of this conversation that needs to be had around kind of the direction we're taking in the African-American Black community and this idea of a hustle mentality. This video today is also going to touch on, I think, some issues in the African-American or Black community that we're going to get into here in just a minute. But first, before I do that, I do want to reference the previous video and do some shout outs, because again, the previous video was about the hustle mentality and you know, whether or not you should go to college. So let me give some shout outs to some of you guys that commented and provide a little bit of feedback. First person I want to shout out, Black Queen Genius 7. Black Queen Genius 7. Love when we get comments from you guys. Now, Black Queen Genius 7, you can't come on here and spread misinformation. I told you guys in the last video, Florida A&M is the #1 HBCU, hands down, best band, best social life, best academics. Black Queen Genius wants to come on and talk about Xavier University in Louisiana being the best HBCU. Look, Xavier is a good school, but I think we still got to give it to Florida A&M. All my rattlers that are watching the channel, check in, let me know with the little rattler symbol down in the comments. But yeah, thank you so much, Black Queen Genius. I think HBCUs are so important and still play an important part in our society. By the way, when we talk about HBCUs, the folks from Howard, since Kamala Harris has been elected as vice president, the folks from Howard have been more annoying than ever in terms of this conversation around the #1 HBCU. We got it. All right, y'all got the vice president. She went to Howard. FAMU is still #1. I get all these emails and people bragging about Howard now. So the Howard people were already cocky before. Now they're even worse than ever. But I still say Florida A&M is #1. As a matter of fact, the second person I want to give a shout out to is Dion Gardner. Her cousin recently graduated from Florida A&M. She had one cousin that graduated and one that was accepted. So congratulations to her and her two cousins again. Florida A&M is #1. I'm not trying to hear what Howard's trying to say. Morehouse, Spelman, Tennessee State is FAMU. Southern, Bethune-Cookman, Florida A&M, #1 HBCU. Another shout out to Tess Mackey. Tess always comes with good comments and feedback. I actually used her comments in the last video. Shirley Farmer, I want to give a huge shout out to her. She talked about in her comment, you know, there's a 16-year-old recently that chose Florida A&M over, I think, Harvard and Yale. Because again, Florida A&M is the #1 HBCU. I forgot to mention in the previous video, I had a similar situation. When I graduated, I was actually 17 when I graduated from high school, so a little bit younger. I kind of moved up a grade in my, you know, in high school and elementary. I think in elementary I got put up a grade, so I graduated like a year early. And I thought I was going to go to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's here in Atlanta, great engineering school, one of the top engineering schools in the country. I was a National Merit Scholar, so I had all kind of scholarship offers from, you know, all these different, you know, highly praised academic schools, some Ivy League offers. But man, I saw that I went on the FAMU campus tour. The FAMU, one of their counselors came to our high school and talked to us, and I was like, yeah, I'm sold, and it is the best decision I ever made in my life going to an HBCU. So shout out to all the HBCUs out there. Shout out to Shirley Farmer for that great comment. Next one, Angela Giashari. She talked about, and there's a great TV show, I forgot about this one. I talked about, I forget her name, Aunt Becky and the whole college admission scandal. I used that in the last video. Operation Varsity Blues, I did see that, Operation Varsity Blues. Great documentary on Netflix about that whole college admission scandal. Definitely watch that if you haven't seen it. It's very interesting. And it just shows you how privilege works, right? How privilege has always been around us. It's been one of these things that's kind of hidden, but that whole documentary is a great documentary, not just about college, but about this whole idea of privilege and how people get privilege. 3 Jeans, she talked about being a stay-at-home mom. Edwana Seymour talked about her son having ADHD. So I have never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I will say, and I would not sit here and say I have it, because I think, you know, that's a serious diagnosis that needs to be made by a qualified physician or doctor. But I've always had a really short attention span. always. So I definitely get where she's coming from when she talked about her son having it. And you know, you have to do some things differently academically and in terms of your life path and where you're going when you have a very short attention span. It's something you can work with, but you've got to learn to work with it. So shout out and blessings to her and her son. And then there's two young ladies I want to shout out, Lorraine Adams and Tanya Hairston. Lorraine Adams and Tanya Hairston. Lorraine's son is going to be an EMT, and Tanya's son is going to be an electrician. Again, I think it's so important for young black men, right? It's not necessarily about going to college. It's about finding a profession that, you know, brings value. And that could be, you know, an EMT. We certainly always need EMTs, electricians, all of that. So shout out to those two young ladies. Couple of other comments, Official Viology, V Lucky Items. They both left some great comments. And then finally, Christine Harris and Cynthia F always leave really, really great comments. So appreciate all that feedback on the previous video. One final comment, or one final shout out, Crashia. So I met Crashia. I was out doing some shopping on Saturday. Met Crashia in one of the stores I was shopping at. And I was surprised she recognized me because I had on the whole mask and everything, but she still recognized me. She's like, oh, I recognize you from your wife's channel. I didn't want to speak. Hey. We love when if you see us in the street, you recognize us, stop us, speak, say hello. We have no issues with that. My wife and I, obviously I hope you get from this channel when you watch us, are very approachable. We have no issues with that. We've gotten recognized here in Atlanta. We actually get recognized the most when we go to Orlando. We always get recognized when we go to Disney. So, hey, stop us, speak, say hello. We love it when you guys stop us, no issues there. You know, I appreciate, you know, all the interaction we have, whether it's in the real world or here on the virtual world. But anyway, enough of those shout outs. Let's get into today's topics. So again, as you guys know, if you've been watching the Unfrumpy Mommy channel for a while, you know, every now and then we'll delve into some type of topic. It could be something in the news world, in the entertainment world, whatever the case may be. A few weeks ago, the big news was, and my wife and I touched on it just a little bit, Derek Jackson, who was like the self-help kind of guru in the social media space. I had only seen him a little bit. I knew who he was, but you know, his whole social media persona was all about uplifting women and giving women advice on how to deal with relationships. And of course, if you haven't heard, it turns out he was giving all these positive affirmations to women, and he had been cheating on his wife and it got caught. So my wife and I touched on it a little bit, and again, I knew who he was, but in the course of that, we got a lot of emails from folks, and they were talking about, hey, on the one hand, you have Derek Jackson, on the other hand, you have Kevin Samuels. Now, I had never heard of Kevin Samuels. He's big on YouTube, but you know, YouTube's a big space, so you don't necessarily know about everything that's going on. So I'd never heard of him. So when people started emailing us, I did a little bit of research, watched a couple of his videos, and I could definitely see how people would say, you know, Derek Jackson had one ideology and Kevin Samuels is all the way on the other side. Like, one is all the way left, one is all the way right. And since the Derek Jackson controversy, I think Kevin Samuels has blown up even more, right? Because that whole topic has come to the forefront. And I've seen a lot of other controversies around that, right? I think Dr. Umar chimed in and talked, you know, now he's starting to have some words with Kevin Samuels and they're starting to be. So, you know, on this channel, right, my wife and I have never shied away. We've always done like relationship videos, right? Because we've been married for 20 years, you know, we're not ashamed to talk about relationships. So, you know, this has never been, quote unquote, a relationship or self-help channel, but every now and then we'll chime in. So given everything that's going on with Derek Jackson, with Dr. Umar, with Kevin Samuels, I thought I'd jump on here and kind of give our take on this whole controversy and this idea of, you know, self-help for women and kind of preaching to women and what they should or should not be looking for in a relationship, or maybe how black women need to step up, or maybe black men. So let me kind of give you 5 things that I've observed just in 20 years of marriage and then watching this whole Derek Jackson, Kevin Samuels, Dr. Umar controversy. So 5 things. First off, number 1, I want to talk about dysfunctionality in relationships. So again, I'd never heard of Kevin Samuels. Obviously, when this controversy came out, I started watching some of Kevin Samuels' videos. Now, this is by no means, look, Kevin Samuels can do what he does. I have no beef with Kevin Samuels. You know, I think you can get something out of just about every YouTuber's video. So this is not to in any way bash Kevin Samuels or say you should watch Kevin Samuels. I will say this, in the videos that I've seen, right, the women that call into Kevin Samuels' show, you know, they're not bad women. They're not women that are totally just bonkers and off the wall. I will say, you know, when they call in, there is a little bit of, I think, naivety and dysfunction there, right? I think the women that call in are young and they still have a lot to learn, and they've got a little bit of dysfunction, and we all have dysfunction, right? So my first point is, if you want to get out of dysfunctional relationships or not be in a dysfunctional relationship, you yourself cannot be dysfunctional, right? You rarely see people that are not dysfunctional, right? You know, well-adjusted people with high self-esteem in dysfunctional relationships. Now, that's not 100% true, but a lot of times if you're in a bad relationship, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you're in a dysfunctional relationship, if you're in a relationship where the other person always cheats, because you're willing to put up with that, there's a level of dysfunction. Now, I don't want anybody watching this to take the word dysfunction as a bad word. We are all dysfunctional. None of us are perfect. It is the level, right, at which you have your dysfunction. If you are in an abusive relationship, more than likely, right, you grew up in an abusive household. You saw abuse. You saw where abuse was tolerated, so you've picked up some dysfunction. If you have a naive attitude about relationships, I remember there was one Kevin Samuels video. I think a young lady had called in. I think she lived here in Gwinnett, and he asked her as part of the conversation, you know, well, how much should the man that you were dating makes? And this girl was in her 20s. You know, she looked young. I think she was in her 20s. She was like, oh, $500,000 a year. And of course, you know, Kevin Samuels can be very, you know, condescending. He talks down a little bit. He immediately pounced on that, as anybody would have, right? He was just overly harsh. So when she said, and you know, just in seeing the video, she didn't come off to me as somebody that was making $500,000 a year herself, right? You could just kind of tell from the video she was very young and kind of naive, you know, and was kind of just making her way in the world. So he jumped on that and said, you know, do you know the percent of people that make $500,000 a year? It's very small. And in that instance, he was right. But what that told me about her, she's very naive, right? She doesn't understand how the world around her works, right? You should know by the time you're in your 20s that $500,000 a year a salary is, you know, probably 1.5% of the population, right? But she didn't know that, and that right there tells me her level of education. She needs to educate herself. And again, some of this goes back to the college versus not college. You don't need to go to college to know that, right? That's just something, it's kind of a common sense thing. So I do think a lot of the women that call in are dysfunctional, and they need to work on themselves, right? Before you get into a relationship, and this is a little bit of a cliche, but I think it's true, you have to work on your own dysfunctions. Now, my second point, let's talk about working on your dysfunctions. Therapy. Therapy is great. I'm all for people getting therapy to deal with their issues, their baggage, their dysfunctions. Here's one of the things I find, though, just a little bit annoying about the way therapy gets thrown out there. Let's be realistic. Not everybody's going to go to therapy for a variety of reasons. You know, one, therapists aren't free, right? It's not like, you know, I think sometimes in some cases your insurance may cover therapy, but not everybody has insurance, right? Somebody that's struggling in their life is probably struggling financially also and can't afford a therapist, right? So this idea of, oh, just go get therapy. If you can afford it, great. And if you have time to do it, great also. Therapy takes time. You might not have, if you're a single mom and you got 2 children, you don't necessarily have time to go to therapy, you know, for hours a week. So therapy is great, but let's kind of chill on the whole, just go get therapy if you're broken. I think you can give yourself therapy, right? I think this idea of introspection, I think high functioning adults, right? And it kind of starts in your late teens, you know, 18, 19, in your 20s. You can start to, if you're highly functioning and highly successful, look in on yourself and figure out, what are my weaknesses? What are some things that I carry as emotional baggage? And I know they're emotional baggage. I know they make me somewhat maybe abnormal or not deal with society. And have that tough conversation with yourself. What do I need to change? What did I maybe grow up and was exposed to that I need to let go? Maybe there are friends or relatives around me that are doing me no good that I need to let go of. You have to have those tough internal decisions. You can give yourself therapy. You can read self-help books. You can watch YouTube videos, right? You don't necessarily have to run to a quote-unquote therapist. It's great if you can, but if you can't, take a hard look at yourself and ask yourself those hard questions. When someone calls into the Kevin Samuels show, right, Kevin Samuels is in an hour. A young lady calls in. He doesn't know this young lady. He doesn't know her history, her past, her baggage. He asks a couple of questions. Where are your people from? How much do you weigh? How tall are you? How much money you make? And that's well and good, but think about what therapy really is, right? I've always said, and on this channel we do a little bit of self-help, but please, I don't know you, right? For me to truly give somebody therapy, for me to truly give somebody advice, I'd have to talk to you for hours and hours on every week, right? For me to tell you what you're doing wrong in your dating life, I'd have to put on like a hidden camera and go on a date with you and observe you, right? So it's interesting, you know, Kevin Samuels kind of does these, 15-minute, hour-long sessions, but he doesn't know the emotional baggage. He doesn't know what motivates these women to maybe make poor choices, right? He just passes judgment instantly. And it makes for great entertainment. Again, this isn't to necessarily down that methodology. It's just to say, sometimes we need to go a level deeper, and don't be afraid to do that. Have a little bit of introspection. Highly successful people have introspection. Again, even going back to the college video, and whether or not you should go to college or not, this idea of a hustle mentality. I think people that are successful without going to college are highly introspective and know their weaknesses and work on their weaknesses without having to go to college. So that's something to really think about. Part of that introspective process should be prayer. Again, Jesus is my motivational speaker, right? Read your Bible, read your Quran, go meditate. Go be in a room by yourself. Go take a walk in the forest by yourself in the woods and meditate and really think about, or pray on it and really think about, and you got to be real with yourself. Sometimes, and there's going to be some hard choices, right? It might be ending relationships with certain friends or relatives, or moving out of your city, out of your state. Don't be afraid to make those big, hard choices to give yourself therapy. And speaking of therapy, I think part of that, and my third thing is, I think what's happened to society in general is that women have choices now, right? So the third thing is, women have more choices now than ever, right? So from a therapy perspective, women have to be have a high amount of self-esteem and a high functioning ability to make good decisions. And let me kind of explain what I mean. I'll go a level deeper. If I go back to even somewhat my generation, but especially like my mom and dad's generation, it was easy for women, but it was also hard. It was easy for women from the perspective of, there weren't a lot of choices. If you were a woman, your expectation was to get married and have kids, and that's it. You maybe worked, or you maybe were a stay-at-home mom. Even the job selection choice was kind of limited, right? So women didn't have choices. And so I guess you could say a positive to that was there wasn't as much pressure, but of course there were a huge amount of negatives, right? Your grandmother, your great-grandma, maybe even your mom stayed in abusive relationships because that was society's expectation, and they really didn't have as many options to leave. So the great thing now is that women have choices. There's another show, Miss America. I've talked about it before. I think it's on Hulu or Netflix, which is a really great show. It's all about the movement around feminism and what happened in the 70s around feminism. But back then, women didn't have choices. Women can even get credit cards without their husband signing for it, right? Back in the 70s, 60s and 70s. So women have choices now, which is great. But what happens when you have choices, right? With great power comes great responsibilities. Women do the choosing now, right? Because you can. Women can work. Women can be stay-at-home moms. Women can not only work, they can make, more than the men that they're in relationships make. They can pay for the dates. So because of that, women get judged more for the choices they make, right? It's easy for other people to judge you. So when Kevin Samuels has a woman call in, it's easy for him to judge her for her choices. And he will frequently reference, back in the day when women were more traditional, women seemed stronger and had less masculine energy. And I would say to that, that might be somewhat true, but they were staying in bad relationships, and they, didn't necessarily have masculine energy because it was a more traditional role. Now society has bigger expectations for women. Women are expected to work outside of the home and to have more of a leadership position. Again, I talked about Kamala Harris, our vice president. So yeah, women have choices. So when women make bad choices, they get judged for it. It's hilarious to me, right? And we all are on social media. We all see what happens in the world of like hip hop and sports, where it's, some woman will date like a rapper, and the rapper will cheat on her multiple times. And it's like, but you chose that, right? I can't think of a rapper that's ever come out that's been just faithful to his wife, 100% of the time, and you've never heard of them stepping out. Maybe Ice Cube. That's the only one I can think of. Even Will Smith, you know, who has kind of a cleaner image, you know, has stepped out. So it's always, I don't want to say funny, but it's interesting to me that you'll see, you know, all of these women, all of these celebrities date these rappers, and then the rapper cheats, and it's like, I can't believe it. Saweetie and Quavo, I think, is the most recent one where, come on, like, and I've all talked about before on this channel, you know, men can be weak. A man that is, you know, quote unquote, an alpha male, or is in the entertainment industry, or is an athlete, just has so much pressure from women coming at him that it's very difficult for him to stay faithful, especially when he's young. So why did Saweetie, for example, choose Quavo? Women have choices, and women are going to get judged for those choices, right? And that's really what Kevin Samuels kind of does, right? You know, back in the day, women were more traditional, but women didn't have a choice. So with agency comes judgment, and also comes quote unquote masculine energy, right? So my fourth point would be, let's talk about this idea of masculine energy and kind of this yin and yang that you have between black women and black men specifically. Why do women have quote unquote masculine energy these days? I think it's that yin and yang between men and women. They're filling a gap, right? I think that's pretty obvious, right? You're filling a gap. If a woman feels like she has to do it all on her own, she has to, you know, wear the pants in a relationship, she's going to exhibit masculine energy. Your grandmother didn't do that because your granddad, you know, probably went out and worked, you know, a blue collar job. You know, this is during the Jim Crow segregation era, a blue collar job all day, right? He came home, he brought home the bacon, and he was the leader of that household. Now, women have stepped up, right? Women are getting the jobs, women are going to college more, and that's why I talked about in the previous college video, you know, whether or not you should go to college. If you have a young black son, he doesn't have to go to college to make a good salary. He can be an EMT or an electrician and make 6 figures. But we don't see enough of that. So the women, you know, African-American black women are going to college, and the men are just kind of, I think more than the women, just kind of in this no man's land. So the women are becoming the leaders in the community, and you're getting that masculine energy. I think if the men start to step up and fill that void, then you would have less of that. Now, I think, you know, here, look, we're in the 2000s. I think the days of a man, even if he's a so-called alpha male and he's making $500,000 a year, I don't think the man in this day and time should just come in and just make all the decisions in the household, right? Even if the man makes that $500,000 a year and the woman is a stay-at-home wife, I still think, you know, we can't be barbarians, right? We don't need to go back and be overly traditional. But I do think if you want women to have less masculine energy, you have to put them in a position where they feel taken care of, where they feel protected, where they feel like they are partners and their voice is heard, and you're not overly overbearing, but you are masculine and do step up to the plate when the time comes. So who's at fault for the so-called poor state of male-female relations in the black community? And I say so-called because I want to say this, if I don't say anything else. There are, despite what you might see in the media, in the traditional media or in social media, there are a lot of healthy black African-American relationships. I would like to think my wife and I are an example of that. There's a lot of them out there. And a lot of times, again, you can't look to the entertainment industry, right? You know, I think people always want to talk about Will and Jada, but you see what happened there, right? You've got to look at the people that maybe aren't as glamorous, right? We can't look to Hollywood. We can't look at athletes. We can't look at entertainers. You got to look at, you know, John and Jane Doe that live 2 doors down from you that have been married for 10, 20 years and are happy. So I first want to say, I do think this idea that there aren't any, you know, that black men and black women are at war is a little bit overblown. I have a lot of friends that are happily married, that have been married for many, many years, never had any cheating, never had any infidelity. Now, I said that, and I will say this. Are there issues that need to be resolved in the African-American and the black community around men and women and the younger generation and just dating? Absolutely. Again, Kevin Samuels, you know, talks about that on his show. What I would say is this. I think it is, if I had to give a percentage, and this is just my opinion, I think if we're saying, you know, who's creating the issue, is it black men or is it black women, that yin and yang? Honestly, I think it's 60% on the black men that are the problem and 40% on black women, right? Because, and it's kind of this chicken and the egg argument, right? I would say, you know, black women might say, well, the black men aren't stepping up and they're not being gentlemen and they're not being providers and they're cheating and they're out here running the streets, they're for the streets, and you can't get a faithful black man. You know, there was that whole thing Lil Duval did about black men don't cheat. You know, why do all black men cheat, right? And there's some validity to that, but then I gotta ask the woman, what do you put up with, right? It's the yin and the yang. People, unfortunately, in this life, will do what you allow them to get away with. Even someone that you marry, someone that you love, you have to set boundaries. So I would ask the women, what are the expectations that you're putting on black men in general? What are you teaching your sons about being faithful, about treating women? What treatment are you allowing yourself to put up with, right, in this space? And when we talk about quote unquote who's at fault, and I think we got to be careful with that word fault, because there are a lot of societal issues that drive some of the perceived dysfunction, right, between black men and black women. You know, we all know the history of segregation and Jim Crow and how, you know, African American families were torn apart and not supported historically, right? It's not, the African American family unit was not something that was supported or allowed to be strengthened, right, throughout really all of American history. So we have to be very careful too about casting blame, right? I think there's enough blame to go around. But you know, I think one of the issues that we got to talk about with who's at fault, and K. Michelle has a song, FAMU graduate, by the way, FAMU. K. Michelle has a song called Can't Raise a Man, which I think is that's an interesting discussion, right? Because I think one of the discussions you will have around black women is that, you know, you get in these relationships with these men and you expect them to step up and be a man, but they act like boys. Here's what I would say to that, and here's the advice I would give. When you're young and you get married, you're not marrying a fully formed woman or man, right? When my wife and I were in our 20s, and especially when we had Chase as a newborn, there were definitely things I learned as a man, as a husband, and things she learned as a wife, right? I think the key there is, though, because we're always learning, right? You're always learning how to be a better spouse. It's the level of learning, right? If you have a newborn baby, for example, and you have to teach your husband, hey, I'm overwhelmed, I've got some postpartum depression, can you kind of step up and help me change diapers? You know, your husband might not know that. He might not know about postpartum depression, so he might say, sure, you know what? I need to learn to do that. I'm gonna learn, right? I've never done that before, but I'm gonna learn as a man and I'm gonna take that on. Nothing wrong with that because he doesn't know. That kind of learning is fine. There's a difference between that and having to teach a man, let's say, for example, when you have your first baby, your first newborn, hey, you gotta go to work and support the child. Hey, you gotta hold the baby. You can't mistreat the baby. You can't abuse the baby, right? There's a difference between teaching somebody how to fundamentally be a parent, right, and be a provider and be a good person versus, hey, here's a couple of things you can do to kind of help me out, right? So when you're in a relationship, ask yourself, am I kind of tweaking this person and maybe telling them how to treat me a little bit? Or am I telling them the basics of life, right? Hey, you need to get a job, don't cheat on me, don't abuse me, treat me with respect, treat others with respect. Ask yourself those questions. If you're generally having to teach somebody how to be a fully formed man or a fully formed woman, then we got to take them back to step number 2. My second point, they need therapy. You need to leave them, let them do some introspection, let them become and step up and be a man or be a woman, and then maybe you can come back and have a relationship with them. I will say, unfortunately, it's rare that happens, right? Somebody that's gotten into their 20s or 30s and still doesn't understand the fundamentals of life, you know, unfortunately, 90% of the time they never will, and you got to kind of leave them where they're at, unfortunately. But, you know, you can give it a try, but definitely don't stay in it. If you're having to teach someone the basics, here's what you need to be a man, here's what you need to be a woman. And so I think in large part what women are doing, right, because you're nurturers by nature, as you should be, because women have the babies, you're willing to nurture a relationship. You're willing to nurture a man, to kind of raise a man. You shouldn't be his mom. Yeah, that nurturing spirit is in you, but again, tweaks are fine, but don't find yourself becoming that person's mom. And so if I think about what Kevin Samuels does, it's a very one-sided conversation, right? He has these women that call in that have that nurturing spirit, that have that spirit of that just want to learn and are very open, and he kind of beats up on them a little bit. And so what I often ask myself is, I'd love to see the reverse of the Kevin Samuels show. Like, give me a Christina Samuels show where it's like a woman that runs a show and she has men call in that have dysfunctional dating relationships. and let her criticize and beat up the men. But I don't think you'd ever see that, because I don't think men would be willing to call in and get help like that, because men don't have that nurturing spirit. They're not willing to kind of nurture a relationship. I think we just kind of fall into the situation that's there, where women are gardeners. Women want to garden and nurture the relationship. They want to put water on it and fertilize it. But sometimes that patch of land won't grow any crops. That patch of land won't grow any flowers. It's barren. You got to leave it. You can't water it. You can't fertilize it. Don't try to nurture it. Move on to another patch of land to grow your garden. So anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think about my 5 points in the comments below. Again, the 5 points were: 1, if you're dysfunctional, you're probably going to be in a dysfunctional relationship. 2, self-therapy is very important when entering in a relationship. 3, women have choices now. With great power comes great responsibility. So there's a lot of pressure on women to make the right choices. Women are the ones that can get pregnant. Women are the ones that are, have the children and will keep the children if you become a single mother. So women have a lot of choices and a lot more responsibility in relationships. They're risking a lot more. They're risking their health and their safety. Number 4, men and women are the yin and the yang in the relationships, and both have to step up. Who's going to step up first? It's the yin and the yang, the chicken and the egg. And number 5, I think the men need to step up more. I think black men need to step up. I think it's a 60-40 thing, and the men, the younger generation needs to really step up. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Appreciate you hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video. Family, hopefully you're feeling blessed and not stressed. I feel blessed and highly favored to be able to join you for another Pink Packet shout out. As we do always at about this time, take a moment, stop, count your blessings, do that for just a second. And now let's get right into these Pink Packet shout outs. Our first one, Ernestine J. Ernestine J, I recognize this name. She's had several orders with us. This says this is your second order, but I think you've had more than that. You are out of Auburn, Alabama, and you ordered a Tina Turner retro. Thank you so much, Ernestine J. Next order, Morgan J. Morgan J out of Randallstown, Maryland. Welcome to the family, Morgan, because this says this is your first order out of Randallstown, Maryland, a Lux shirt. Thank you so much. Wear that in good health. Speaking of wearing things in good health, Patricia D might be celebrating a birthday, so hopefully you're celebrating a birthday in good health, because I recognize that name. You've had many orders with the store. You ordered the Happy Birthday t-shirt bundle, which is a 2-shirt bundle. So happy birthday, Patricia D, if it is your birthday. You also ordered Rich Auntie Vibes. You're out of beautiful Colorado Springs, Colorado. Thank you so much, Patricia D. Next on the agenda, Elizabeth S.G. Elizabeth S.G. out of Avon, Indiana. First order, welcome to the family again. Martin Malcolm Mandela t-shirt and a caramel cutie. Thank you so much, Elizabeth S.G. out of Avon, Indiana. And last but certainly not least, LaShawn W. LaShawn W., who is a great friend of the store. Thank you so much for your 10th order, LaShawn. Thank you so much. Round of applause for LaShawn out of Bridgeton, New Jersey. She ordered a Lux shirt. Thank you so much, LaShawn W. And LaShawn used our secret discount code. So remember, in every newsletter, we always have a discount code that's good for like the whole month. And the newsletters will generally come out at the beginning of the month. But now what we started to do when we have those monthly newsletters, at the very beginning of the month, we'll have a secret code in that newsletter. Now, to get the code discount, you got to know a little bit about the Unfrumpy Mommy YouTube channel. You have to kind of watch the channel and know some of our habits as a family and some of the things we like to do. So LaShawn W used the secret code. Thank you so much. And I will see you all on the next Pink Packet shout out. What up, YouTube family? Hopefully you're feeling blessed and not stressed. Take a moment, count your blessings as we always do about this time. Let's jump into the Pink Packet shout outs. By the way, if your shout out was missed, if you're like, wait a minute, I ordered a while back and I didn't hear my name shouted out. Normally we come out with videos every Sunday, or my wife does. but I've started doing more videos midweek. So you may start to see more videos on the Unfrumpy Mommy channel in the middle of the week. The last video I put out, which was this past Wednesday, which again is not our normal release schedule, I got so much feedback, great feedback on a pink package shout out I did a while back about college and whether or not you should go to college. I got so much great feedback, I decided to release a video last Wednesday. And so, or this previous Wednesday. So there are a lot of shout outs in that video. So if you're missing yours, it might be in that Wednesday video. Go check out that Wednesday college video. I appreciate all the love you guys give me on this channel. When I come on and do like my own solo thing, or when I, jump on with the Unfrumpy Mommy, I appreciate all the love that you guys show me when we have these topics, whether it's the pink package shout out or, a video I decide to do on my own. Thank you so much, guys. You guys have been a blessing, especially people like Judy S. This is something like Judy's 30th order. You guys know how we love about Judy. She's a great supporter of the UNFRUMPYMOMMYSTORE and YouTube channel. Judy hails from Wauchula, Florida. She ordered the Black Mom Magic. Very appropriate shirt for this upcoming Mother's Day. Next shirt, or next order, huge order, first time order, very blessed. Adesumbo A out of Laurel, Maryland. We thank you so much for this first order. Bob Marley, Lux shirt, spoiled wife shirt. Thank you so much, Adesumbo A out of Laurel, Maryland. Next on the agenda, Mowgli E out of Sunrise, Florida. Another Florida, so we got Wauchula, Florida and Sunrise. This is Mowgli's second order. Thank you so much. We certainly always appreciate anytime you value your first order so much that you come back for a second order. It's one thing to get somebody's order the first time, but when they come back, that's when you know you're doing something right. So thank you so much, Mowgli, Bob Marley, Malcolm X. And you ordered a men's shirt. So the Malcolm X is a men's shirt. We love it when we get orders, as I always say, from the guys. Next up, first order, Annette B. Now that name, I don't think this is Annette's first order, so that name sounds real familiar. She's out of Camp Springs, Maryland. Thank you so much, Annette B. You ordered the Faith Script shirt. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Anissa H. I don't think this is Anissa. The name's starting to sound familiar. I could be wrong. Out of Pinson, Alabama, Anissa H. out of Pinson, Alabama. Rich auntie vibes. Thank you so much, Anissa H. out of Pinson, Alabama. And I will see you all on the next Pink Package Shout Out.